taking a look at eloquence, and have a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. Up here, because when you do take a look at his speeches, and we'll look at, I have a dream speech next week, because there'll certainly be a lot of examples of eloquence in there, but he's certainly someone who utilizes a lot of them. What's the biggest difference between delivering an argument, like verbally, orally, as opposed to writing an argument? So like essay versus speech. In your mind, what are some of those drastic differences between the two?
Tone, like you can make it sound like
Easier to show emotion and
Yeah.
tone by saying it as opposed to reading it. So you get an email, you get a text message from somebody, and you could go with sarcastic voice in your head or yelling voice, but you're not quite exactly sure.
Yeah.
So the tone's going to be easier.
I feel like if you deliver a speech on the spot, it's more like what you believe from the heart instead of like writing it down.
Okay. So more, and not trying to switch it into ethos pathos, but more like emotional on the spot, where not necessarily more logical, but you have time to kind of frame it in certain ways. Okay.
Body language and like hand motions comes into like whether you're delivering a speech versus writing it.
Hand motions can also come into play when you write if you have messy handwriting.
There.
And
In a speech, you can counter the other person's argument, whereas in an essay, you kind of have to guess what the counter argument is.
yeah, like kind of, make an inference. So some might argue that, but you don't necessarily know what it would be. You could have, I guess, if you had like two newspaper columnists that are kind of dueling it out a little bit, but you're not going to get that immediate reaction that would kind of be taking place with it. Yeah, all those things are certainly going to be big differences. And one of the main ones also, in addition, not saying more important or more significant than the ones that were mentioned, but this is where eloquence kind of comes into play with it, is the time factor of it. A speech, now they can be recorded, whether Shrey's getting his iPhone out or you got newscasts taking place. But for the most part, it's a temporary, momentary event that happens. Dylan says words, Nick says words, I say words, and then after I've said them, that's it, they're done. And they can kind of evaporate, so to speak. Whereas if you write, it's certainly more permanent. There's a record. Again, you do have speech transcripts, so understand that there is some variations to these and whatnot. But for the audience, if you read it and there's something that you don't get, you can go back to it. If you like it a lot, you can reread it again. But if you are listening to a speech, it's a one-time moment. And that is why with eloquence, people put a lot of emphasis on it. And we might say things sound more flowery or more figurative or use more imagery or whatnot than we normally would when it comes to speech writing. Because the whole point of eloquence is to help emphasize certain points. So what's the purpose? Why are we going to use it? Well, it moves people more so than just plain everyday language. When it comes to just simply writing, I like things to be short, simple, concise, to the point, direct. I don't like throwing in extra words and things of that nature. But when it comes to speech writing, you need to help someone remember, when it comes to speaking itself, not just speech writing, you need to help audiences remember and understand things, and that's where eloquence starts to come across. There's two main types of eloquence, and we'll put some definitions up here in a moment. You have schemes, which is more syntactical things. It's sentence structure, it tends to be a lot of repetition. And then you have tropes. Tropes are going to be more of the figurative language, so your similes, your metaphors, analogies, oxymorons, all that kind of stuff. But really what you want to do with eloquence is you're trying to get people to remember, to understand, and emphasize would be the big, clear thing with it. When to use eloquence would be when you are coming across a main idea, you want to do something, I don't want to say just kind of dress it up, but you want to help people remember. And that could be as simple as, reiterating points over and over again when it comes to some type of repetition. The first ones we're going to look at today, I don't know if we'll finish all the schemes today, probably not, is going to be syntax, as I was mentioned. So a scheme involves a change in the ordinary arrangement of words. You could be putting some words in a reverse order than you normally would. You might be adding some words that you would not normally do, but you are altering the arrangement. Generally, it's a form of repetition so that people remember it better. A fear that I think sometimes people have when it comes to giving speeches is it going to sound too repetitive if I keep repeating the idea over and over and over again? If it's an important, deep, concept that you want people to remember, yeah, you want to emphasize it. And that could be something through alliteration, could be through anaphora, could be through antimetaboly, anaclosis. And if you don't know what those are, that's why we're here. Anaclosis sounds like a dinosaur. It's not. One that I do think you're going to be pretty familiar with is going to be alliteration. Although you'd be surprised how many people mess this up when it comes to like midterm exams and little quizzes and whatnot. Alliteration, repetition of initial or medium consonants in two or more adjacent words. So you're not repeating the word, you're just simply repeating the sound of a word. And again, if you're coming across some kind of very important concept that you want people to remember, it's a pretty good idea to have a little bit of alliteration there. Using alliteration for words like who, when, where simply is not going to count. But if you are using it for an important concept that you are trying to get across, we were looking in English class last week, a speech that JFK gave about the steel companies and how they're stealing money from the U.S., and he made reference that the steel companies, in their pursuit of power and profiteering, have basically wronged the United States. Their pursuit of power and profits, that's a significant alliteration that helps kind of stick in people's minds. Let's see if our videos are going to work today.
You clanking, clattering collection of collisionous junk.
I feel like it's Sheldon, who I know you love.
It's a great show.
Oh, come on, go back. So, simple example coming from Wizard of Oz, step 4, Tin Man. Clinking, clanking, clattering, collection of collignous junk. Certainly going to kind of emphasize, those kind of points towards Tin Man. So anytime that you have that repetition, generally it'll be accepted 2 or more adjacent words. I would say if you're really trying to emphasize, you don't need to go up to 5 times like we would have here, but 3 would probably be a good point. They don't necessarily have to be right after one another, but certainly within close proximity within like the same phrase. So alliteration is a simple task, a simple type of eloquence that people can absolutely use. When we do our next speech, and you can kind of keep this in mind, you're going to be required to use at least 3 types of eloquence in your speech. Chances are a lot of you already naturally do so, whether it be alliteration, whether it be some other forms of repetition that we're going to get into, or whatever the case may be. Anaphora, you also hear the term anaphora. Both pronunciations are certainly acceptable. This is going to be repetition of same words at the beginning of successive clauses or sentences. So Martin Luther King, 1965, let us march to the realization of the American dream. Let us march on segregated housing. Let us march on segregated schools. Let us march on poverty. Let us march on ballot boxes. Repetition, same word, same phrase at the beginning of successive clauses. It could be something like this, where it's let us march, where you got a 3-word phrase. It could be something as simple as a 1-word repetition. There'll be examples where Henry David Thoreau in Civil Disobedience repeats the word it, like 5 sentences in a row at the beginning in reference to government. So it can be something simple with 1 word, or it could be a phrase that's going to be a little bit longer with 3. Notice you do have segregated schools, ballot boxes. Those would also be examples of simple alliteration being used. Again, kind of just help them remember what it is that needs to be marched, what needs to be reformed, what needs to be changed in 1965.
One very effective public speaking or presentation technique is called anaphora, which means simply the repetition of a key word or phrase at the beginning of successive sentences. It's a great way of emphasizing a point, and Barack Obama used it often during his inauguration speech in January 2009.
The God-given promise that all are equal, all are free, and all deserve a chance to pursue their full measure of happiness. For us, they packed up their few worldly possessions and traveled across oceans in search of a new life. For us, they toiled in sweatshops and settled the West, endured the lash of the whip, and plowed the hard earth. For us, they fought and died in places like Concord and Gettysburg, Normandy, and Quai San. This is the price and the promise of citizenship. This is the source of our confidence, the knowledge that God calls on us to shape an uncertain destiny. This is the meaning of our liberty and our creed, why men and women and children of every race and every faith can join in celebration across this magnificent mall.
It's not a shopping mall, Jack. It's like the mall in Washington. Just to make sure clear. So it could be something as simple as this that he was ending with, or I think was the first example, or you could have, as we said, a little bit lengthier phrase. But it's just going to be repetition. With anaphora, I'd say about 3 times would be what you would at least want. Twice might sound as if it's only just circumstantial or by accident. But if you have that repetition 3 times, you're certainly emphasizing a key point. Introductions, bless you. Opening statements is a good time that a lot of people will use anaphora, or they'll also use epistrophe. Anaphora, it's at the beginning. Epistrophe, it's repetition, but at this point, it's going to be at the end. It doesn't necessarily always have to be in this context, but a lot of times, folks will use anaphora for what should happen. So you're trying to get people to do something, to take some kind of action. And then folks will use epistrophe as a way to kind of look back upon things. Now, again, that's not set in stone, because for when President Obama was doing the For Us, he was looking at what people had done in the past. But if a lot of times anaphora will get used for what is trying to plead or make people do action, and then epistrophe is you're looking at something that didn't happen. And this would be a case here, Malcolm X. As long as you were sent to Korea, Germany, and the South Pacific, you bled. As long as the white men sent you to Korea, you bled. He sent you to Germany, you bled. He sent you to the South Pacific to fight the Japanese, you bled. So you're putting emphasis here on what happened, what was kind of an effect of some kind of action that did take place. You do have, you could argue, a bit of anaphora happening with as long as here and as long as here, but then it kind of peters out and switches over to he sent you, he sent you. So you could even argue you got 2 types of anaphora happening with the epistrophe that would be happening. Main point of either of these two with the repetition, you're trying to emphasize certain points. You're beating it into your listener's head a little bit so that there is not any miscommunication about what your main point would be. Simple example of epistrophe here with the Gettysburg Address, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. Just one word that's getting used, but at the end of those clauses, still going to be considered epistrophe. Anaphora beginning, epistrophe end. You can think A, alphabet beginning, E, end for epistrophe. Or some other fancy mnemonic device that you come up with. Maddie, you remember how to say this word? There you go. Antimetaboly. Antimetaboly. Repetition of words in successive clauses, but you go in reverse grammatical order. And this example will certainly should give you an idea of how it works.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
So you're taking this idea, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for the country. You take the phrase and you switch it. Some people, I don't know why, eat to live. I live to eat. Ice cream. Lots of ice cream. Yeah, pizza. Taco night tonight.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I can eat a lot of
You making them or you getting them somewhere?
No, making them. It's in the crock pot. Shredded beef taco.
You make them in the crock pot.
Yeah, it's like a big pot roast, and then the beef will then shred it. I don't know what you're gonna.
I've been having chicken before. I like
I
chicken.
know.
Your chicken
I
ones,
usually,
too?
I usually make my taco meat in like a big pan.
Yeah, like ground beef.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that too. But this one is we're going.
I can never fit enough in the pan.
You know, got some fresh cut sirloin here that we're going to use. Shop and Save had it on sale. Who am I to say no? Because again, I live to eat. But when we even have like guacamole tonight for this, I'm going to make some black beans with lime and cilantro. This is a big ordeal. Emilianos, watch out! Here I come.
Yeah, nourish them. Sometimes people will bite them and they're just like a rock.
And I have cheesecake for dessert.
That sounds like a good dinner. Honestly,
I will be a large person tomorrow when you see me. So. That's okay. Another example here of antimetabolically, because it's good to see some in print. You know, tonight we're awakened to danger and called to defend freedom. Notice again, alliteration, danger, and defend. Whether we bring our enemies to justice or justice to our enemies, justice will be done. So shortly after the 9/11 attacks, form of antimetabolically that at the time President George Bush would have used. So our enemies to justice or justice to our enemies. All right. Anadiplosis, this is the one that sounds like a dinosaur. I'm thinking one of the, like, probably plant-eating, quick-running dinosaurs. Anadiplosis.
I think it's a bird.
I was thinking pterodactyl at first, but then I'm like, I don't know. It just sounds different. There was like a big fish dinosaur discovered like 2 or 3 years ago that was supposed to be like the largest now living being in the history of Earth. Because life does not exist on other planets, people. It's only here. Why didn't you pick that one?
Pick what? Life on other planets?
Yeah.
What was I gonna say about that?
I'm not worried about what you were going to say. I'm worried about what I was going to say.
what argument would you use that for, Mr.
Well, it depends what side I was on. Oops. Hold on.
You are affirmative.
For life, no, I would have gone negative. So you have repetition of the last word at one clause as well as at the beginning of the next. So you end with a word and then you start with that next word. This is the thing where your English teachers, like me, circle it on an essay and go, this sounds awkward because we assume you're not smart enough to do it on purpose.
My social class work, our teachers circled all my demean verbs in my essay. All of them. Literally
I
all
would
of
do.
them.
Those were the days.
So how would you do?
To be verbs.
Okay, jeez. Why you jumping around like that?
This is dramatic. I did not make this, but that's some music we got going. I did not do this one.
Yeah, Mr. Pan, I missed your book.
Beauty in literature.
Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
What a terrible music transition. And that would be the anadiplosis, because you're going from all you need is love, and then love is all you need, which you could argue you have a little bit of antimetabolism as well. The Yoda example would be a more classic one, where it tends to be, and we're going to have a term climax here that can also be anadiplosis, but doesn't always have to be. But there's like a chain reaction of events where something leads into another. Some of you have probably seen, although this movie's like, what, 18 years old or something now, Gladiator, Russell Crowe movie. Never heard that before, that's like my mom's favorite movie.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, watch it. Graduation night, I'll see Mama Pig. I'll go. I'll like her again. But in the movie, that for those of you who've seen it, there's a part where Russell Crowe is he's kind of like right before his final battle with what's the Caesar's name? Joaquin Phoenix's character. Can't think of it. Well, he's Caesar, but he has another name. But it basically goes. A general who became a slave who became a gladiator who defines an emperor. That would be an example of antidiplosive. So a lot of times it get used for kind of like a chain reaction of events that you would be having that you're going to take a look at. Antithesis, this will probably be the last one that we're going to look at. Antithesis is going to be juxtaposition of contrasting ideas, but they're often written in parallel form. I have an example here. It's going to be kind of hard to hear because it's from the moon landing. Or some of you might be going, the moon landing in Hollywood.
That car just doesn't float.
What do you think? Did we land on the moon?
No.
Watch the myth.
Bro, we know. Like
I give benefit of the doubt. I say we landed.
40 years ago, you could like look through the telescope and go at the moon and you see a flag there. What did you do?
That should have been one.
Yeah, I say
False.
it's false.
Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna.
Many were called, but few were chosen would be an example of antithesis, where you have contrasting ideas, many called, few chosen. Here with our moon landing, which again we can't really hear.
I want you to
Shh. Ooh, he's saying it. It's as if you were on the moon right now saying it. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. So it's parallel form, but it's a contrasting idea. It's a small step for man, but it's a giant leap for mankind. Tale of Two City Folks, the opening lines of the book would certainly be antithesis. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Contrasting ideas, but written in parallel forms. All right? So antithesis, that's what we'll stop for today. We'll pick up with the rest tomorrow. We should be okay. The long term, next Friday, because we'll go over some stuff with this early tomorrow and then also beginning next week. Next Friday is going to be then a matching quiz for eloquence. This one, just so you're aware, will be term and definition. It's not going to be term and examples like what you had for the logical fallacy. So good chance you'll probably find it a little bit easier. There's a lot of A terms that you have to keep straight. So just kind of keep that one in mind.
Why would they?